Hello again my dudes, Kadima with another Dragon's Dogma 2 build video, this time for the Warfarer. Now before I start talking about the Warfare build, let's talk about an important thing about being a Warfarer. As a Warfarer you have access to all vocations, and you can come with any kind of crazy nonsense or crazy effective builds you might feel like it. In this video, I'm going to show you my two favorite builds to use as a warfare and what I believe to be the most effective way to play as a warfare. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean this is the only way to go about when being a warfare. You can use whatever the hell you want, just as I said. But uh, the reason for my two builds is that although they revolve around doing the exact same thing, it's how you do that thing that is different. And it will depend on your preference, personal preference, to be honest, on how you enjoy playing the game. Do you want to be close quarters, or do you want to do ranged attacks and stay at a safe distance from your enemies? Again, both options are very viable, both options are very good, and as a warfarer, you get to do exactly just that. Let's start with my first option. You can see the staff on my back, but let's talk about what to use. So as a warfarer, I choose to call this combination the Arch-Mage, the Arch-Mage Archer, because you'll be a sorcerer and you'll also be a magic archer. That will be the two weapons of your choice, which then with the skills you will have equipped will allow you to play very effectively as a ranged attack based warfare. Now, you will need an arch staff for the sorcerer side of things, and you need a magic bow. Now, I'm using the best two in the game, the Dragon's Wit and the Grianmar. When it comes to the armor, because you are a warfarer, you can use whatever armor you choose. I like to be tanky and I like to look good at the same time. So I'm going with the Ancient Gala for the helmet. I'm going with the Dominator's armor for the chest. I'm going with the Vanguarder's greaves for the legs. And again, as usual, the Champion's mantle. Now, I know that the best part of the chest piece is the spikes. I am very well aware of that, despite what one of you actually mentioned in a previous video. I am very well that the best good-looking part of the armor is the spikes, but I can not be without this mantle. I absolutely love this cloak. When it comes to the rings, there's some flexibility. Again, I like to keep the Ring of Triumph because I find it very important to be very lightweight, and the Ring of Triumph will keep me exactly on the high side of the very lightweight. When it comes to the other ring, I'm using the Ring of Vehemence, simply because we'll be aiming at the target's weak spots when using the archer, the magic archer side of the build. And that will increase the stagger and the knockdown you'll be doing to foes. When you are using the alternative version of this build, which is the one you can go for close combat, you can still use this ring, and I actually do recommend that you do so. Now, let's talk about the weapon skills.
Look, as long as you have you business with the guild, sir. I should be glad to assist you.
In this version of the build, as weapon skills, as you can see in the equipped weapon skill side on the top, on the bottom right side of the screen, I'm using the rearmament, which is something you must have so you can swap between weapons. There's no way around it. I still think this should be a core skill. I understand the reason why it's not. It's because you are then being a warfare, you actually only have access to three skills. One of them will always be the rearmament, so you can swap weapon. So if this was a core skill, you would actually have access to four equipped weapon skills, and that would absolutely break the game. This class would be so much better than any other class that I don't think anyone would play with a different thing. On top of that, as a warfarer, this will be the only ultimate skill you will have access to. You will not have access to any other classes, any other vocations, ultimate skills. Which makes sense, because again, if you could have the rearmament and if you could have the formless feint, for example, from the thief, God protect us, you would be literally unkillable while being able to do the biggest amount of damage possible in this game. Now, I understand why this is not a core skill. So there, that being said, you need the rearmament. From the sorcery side of things, you will only actually need one skill, which is the Augural Flare, which is right here. The Augural Flare, I've mentioned this in my sorcerer build video. It basically attaches a bomb to the enemy, to wherever you aim the bomb to be. You will try to aim at weak spots. So if you are fighting a dragon, you want to put this on the heart. If you are fighting a chimera, you can go to the lion face, the snake tail, or the goat's face. I try to go for the goat's head because it is actually much easier to aim the magical bow arrows at the goat's head. For example, you have to try to aim it at something that it will be easy enough to aim. If you are fighting a cyclops, you want to try to go for the head. If you are fighting the phantom guy that I'm going to give an example of in a minute, you don't even really need to care for that one. You just aim at the body, and then you will be doing all the damage by shooting arrows at his body. Now, what the Augural Flare is going to do is you are going to, after you cast the Augural Flare, you are going to use the rearmament to swap to the magical bow. And when you swap to the magical bow, you are not going to use any of the two equipped weapon skills. You are simply going to shoot arrows as normal. Normal arrows with the rivet shot activated. Not the pinpoint one, the rivet shot, because you want as much arrows to go at the Augural Flare spot as quickly as possible to trigger more explosions and for each explosion to do more damage. You could try to use Sagittarius Avalanche on it. It could potentially work if one of the other pawns is doing damage directly on that spot. But that would require you to trust that to happen, which I don't. I have a warrior and I have a thief on Gandalf's side of my pawn party, but I don't trust my pawns to do any damage. I appreciate that they do, and I acknowledge that they do, but I'm not counting on it for the explosions from the Augural Flare. So I take charge of doing all the damage, and that's where my focus is. In any case, when you are not fighting big enemies, when you are not fighting dragons or chimeras, you are not really going to need to use the sorcery side of things because you'll just be wasting. You will not need it. With the magical bow side of things, you will be equipped with the two necessary skills to ensure that you can kill small enemies as quickly as possible without much of a fuss from a safe distance. The first skill for that is the Blaze Fang arrow. When I did my magic archer build, I've demonstrated why this skill is so good. It basically is a homing missile that sets everything on fire after it actually explodes. So not only it throws all enemies onto the floor with the explosion, if they remain alive after the explosion, but 9 out of 10 times all the enemies in the area just die from the Blaze Fang arrow explosion. Those that survive, they will be caught on fire and die before they even get to stand up. But if for whatever reason you are fighting, for example, one of those big wolves, they will not die from one Blaze Fang arrow. You can cast a second one if you want, or in my case, I just shoot normal arrows while my warrior does the tankiness and my thief do the stealing and damage at close quarters, and everything goes as smoothly as possible. Now, for the tougher enemies, such as the lizards that happen to have a tougher hide, you want to go with the Sagittarius Avalanche, because this will just one-shot everything. And also, although we are not a magic archers, so our magic damage is not going to be as fantastic as it potentially would be if you were just a magic archer, the Sagittarius Avalanche will kill a Cyclops with 3 casts on its head. So you still have enough damage output to kill a Cyclops with ease, without even having to go for the Augural Flare. You can still go for it if you want, but you won't even need it because the build will be that strong. For the augments, again, it's a matter of preference. I like to go with what I have equipped because I just find that it's the most effective way to manage my stamina, my resources, and to do as much damage as possible at the lowest cost for stamina possible. So I'm going with endurance to increase my stamina even further. I'm going with lethality, which increases damage dealt to target's vitals, sagacity, which augments my magic. In this case, I find sagacity to be particularly interesting and useful because the sagacity will increase your magic, which increases the damage per explosion from the augural flare, but it will also increase the damage of your magical arrows from the magic bow. So in this case, I strongly recommend you using this. I know that the increase is only 30 points in magic, but because you are increasing both weapons, I strongly recommend using this. Exaltation augments your stamina recovery speed. Subtlety, it's a must because you don't want to be the target of enemies, especially the big enemies, and especially when you are costing the augural flare. Nothing is more annoying than when, for some reason, my warrior loses the aggro of a boss and I actually turn to be the target. Because the bosses will do one of two things. They will either target the fighter or the warrior if they have provocation or if they use roar, but they will turn to you, being the warfare, doing so much damage exactly because of that. You are doing the biggest amount of damage, they will turn to you. So I think it's important to go with subtlety for this one. And then we've got zeal, which reduces the stamina consumed when performing a weapon skill. But just before I show you the alternative close quarters combat version of the warfare build, let me just quickly show you my stats. When I have the magic bow equipped, I have strength at 333, which is irrelevant, but the magic is 982. Again, this is not ideal because you are a warfare, so your stats will be slightly halved. You could easily have more than 1000 magic even as a magic archer, but in this case you have quite high defense because I'm using heavy armor. I am defensive at 956, knockdown power is at 468. Knockdown resistance is not great, it's 231, but magic defense is actually quite high as well, 674. It's also important to keep in mind that with this build and the current stats, with the magic bow equipped, I have 2010 HP and 1410 stamina. Now, when it comes to the close quarters version of playing as a warfarer, there's not much of a change except with the magic bow side of the build. I'm using the Dragon's Vein daggers instead of the bow. Everything else is the same, including the rings. So this means that instead of using the augural flare with the sorcery side of things and then doing the damage with a magic bow, what we'll be doing is we'll be using the augural flare and then just spamming carve or skull splitter onto the target that you got the augural flare with as quickly as possible, and you will do a tremendous amount of damage. Now, when it comes to the stats for this case, I have strength at 912, which is not great, but the reason why I'm 912 um, with the daggers equipped, it's because I actually have the augment that increases the strength instead of magic, because the number one source of damage will be the physical side you do with the daggers, mixed with the magic explosions from the augural flare. So it's important to have high strength as well, and I swap the magic so I can have both above 900. When it comes to the skills using this
Welcome. Have you business with the guild, sir? I should be glad to assist.
when it comes to the skills needed when using the close combat version of the Warfarer, in my opinion, to be more devastating than the Magic Archer version, is because you will be doing even more damage than you will when using the magic bow side of things. The magic bow is good in the sense that it will keep you from harm's way. You will be at a safe distance from your enemy, so you are less likely to take damage. When you are playing with the warfare version of a sorcery mixed with a thief, which is this case, you will be more of a target, even though you have the augment to decrease the likelihood of you being a target because you are so close quarters, especially when fighting big enemies such as dragons or cyclops or chimeras, you are more likely going to get hit. So that's the number one difference. The payoff is that you will do even more damage as a thief than you will do as a magic archer. In any case, again, you will need the rearmament, as I just explained before. You will also need the augural flare, of course, because the idea is to cast the augural flare onto any target. In this case, I wouldn't worry so much about going to the weak spots, because if you go to the weak spots of a Cyclops, being the head, as a thief, you will not be able to reach it. You want to try to go for a leg, for example, something that you can easily reach and you can easily do damage just by spamming carve. When it comes to the other skills that you want, they are from the thief. You want the smoke shroud, just because when you are fighting smaller enemies, you don't have to use the augural flare or the sorcery side of things. You just use the smoke shroud, you press triangle for the twin fangs, and you just one shot every single small enemy. The other skill you want is the skull splitter, of course, because this is the highest damaging skill in the entire game. Nothing does as more damage as this. And if you actually manage to position the augural flare, for example, in this case, if you had the augural flare on the knee of the Cyclops in the video, you could do the skull splitter next to his leg, so you would do a lot of damage per hit, and you will also add explosions and add damage to the augural flare by having the skull splitter hitting the augural flare spot. So if you manage to do that, you will do pretty much one-shot bosses as well, or maybe two-shot them. It depends on how lucky you get at targeting the augural flare spot. In any case, the augments, it's the same as the previous version. The only change is you'll be using verb instead of sagacity for the increased strength. And that's basically it in terms of difference. Let's talk about the party. Again, I recommend that when you play as a warfarer, you have a party with these three a mage, a fighter, or a warrior. I prefer a warrior because they do more damage, and maybe a thief. What I do recommend, which is important to have, and I'm going to show you, is your warrior. It is important that your warrior has two skills. The number one skill is roar, because this will attract enemies' attentions, and this will help you when they use it. And you also want them to have provocation, which increases the likelihood of being targeted by foes. So you want the warrior to have both of these, because this is a passive skill, it's always there, but sometimes if they lose the aggro, you will see them using the roar to get the enemy's attention back to them, and that can be very helpful. As the mage in your party, for example, my Gandalf, it is important that they have the Celestial Pain for the infinite stamina. One of the affinities, I recommend fire, because it's most of enemies are weak to fire except for dragons, and you want them to have the debilitation cure and the healing side of things. As for the augments, it's entirely up to you. You could potentially use the one that decreases the likelihood of them being targeted by the enemies, but that is a thief skill, and my Gandalf is never been a thief, so he doesn't have access to that one. But if you can, I would go with that one for the mage as well. On the thief that you might have in your party, just like me, I like to have a thief. One of the things you might want to make sure they have is the lethality, which will increase the damage done to the vitals, enemy's vitals as well. So that will also help. Subtlety is important because they will also decrease the being the target by the foe, so this will help the warrior take all the damage if possible. Now, nothing better to do than giving you a few examples on both versions of the build in action so you can guys see how it plays off. I know this is a very long video, but I thought the best way to go about it is to showcase both versions of the build in the same video instead of making two separate videos for the same vocation. And also, the best way to go on about showing how these builds work is giving you the two examples of the two same enemies being hit with the two versions. So in this case, using the Magic Archer version, you can see I've used the Ogro Flare on this dragon to aim for his head, but the best way to go about it, of course, I'm just cracking on with a potion to increase my magic damage. Now we are trying to go for the heart. Unfortunately, I aimed my Ogro Flare very poorly and I ended up using it on his leg and then on its wing. It was a bit of a mess, to be honest. But then I did finally manage to aim it at the right spot after he actually gave me a bit of a hug. Because this dragon, you know, was feeling very lonely, so he decided to give me a little hug in between and, you know, get me to kiss the floor. This is when it helps that your warrior takes the aggro, and in this case, I dare say I was poorly equipped. My warrior did not have provocation, my warrior did not have roar. It was a bit of a mess. I had to fix it later on, but still, this was one of the few dragons I had left in the Unmoored world. I have killed everything else. Now I finally managed to get the Ogro Flare on its heart, and we get to dish out some damage. He has 2 bars left, as you can see. We're doing some damage. He does get me with his nasty explosions, and he gets me all dizzy, but it's already too late because he is dead. Hooray! Victory and being high. For the next example, I'm going to be killing the Phantom guy, the Headless Phantom. As you can see, I'm already trying to get the Ogro Flare, but he decides to hide behind that little tree, and he was being a little bit annoying. But he then teleports to my face. I did get the Ogro Flare on him, as you can see, and now I'm already throwing arrows at him, but all my other party members were on the floor. The thief is doing some damage, but the warrior's not doing great. You can see him flying around being hit. I get another Ogro Flare, get a few more arrows on him, and at this time I think, oh, I don't even need any more because he's already going to explode and die. And there you go, guys. This is the Magic Bow Sorcerer Warfare version. Now for the version with the thief, I'm going to start with the dragon as well. I send my warrior ahead. I get the Ogro Flare. I'm trying to actually hit the target, which I managed to go for his heart. He decided to take flight to make things a bit more complicated. I managed to get a second Ogro Flare on its heart. I managed to dodge his hand, and I'm already spamming Carve. He's trying to move around too much, which doesn't really help. But as you can see, the first Ogro Flare does a tremendous amount of damage because of how many hits you get as the thief. I cast a second one and I go with Skull Splitter just to ensure that I managed to hit while he was getting up. And as you can see, he's actually already dead. I'm not even doing anything. This version with the thief is just incredibly powerful. The damage output is just insane. Now, going with the Phantom guy, as for the same example as the previous version, you get the Ogro Flare, there you go, and as soon as you do, you want to go up on the target and do as many hits with the daggers as possible. I got these guys getting in the way, but you can see the explosions claimed more than half of his health already. I just cast a bomb to get rid of these small enemies first, because I don't want to accidentally cast the second Ogro Flare on one of them. He managed to get a few hits in the middle of my smoke cloud. I get the second Ogro Flare, I get my blades up, and I finish the job. I apologize because I am fully aware this video is tremendously long, but I thought it was the best way to go on about it. Please subscribe if you haven't yet, leave any comments in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio.